All right, so perfect second objection. Imagine you are in a horrific car accident and with four of your buddies. Well, let's just name them. He doesn't say this, but let's name them Albert, Brian, and what did I call it? Charlie? Albert, Brian, and Charlie. And unfortunately, Albert's brain was destroyed in the car accident. Your body was destroyed, and they believe half of your brain was destroyed, right? And you are going to have a brain transplant, right? And that half of your brain is still working. It's pretty remarkable how the two hemispheres in your brain can function for each other, not fully, but at least partially. And so, let's say half of your brain they believe is damaged, and because of that, you're gonna have to get the brain transplant into Albert's body, because he doesn't have a brain anymore, so it doesn't matter. Although his body's totally functioning well, and your brain still remembers. It still has all the same memories, traits, and goals, right? You still have the same character traits, you're still a happy-go-lucky guy, and you still are honest and all those things. You still remember all the things that you've done, and you still have the same goals, as in, to maximize your self-interest and all kinds of stuff like that. Let's say also you have $1 million and you're trying to think of what am I going to do, because I'm not going to be me anymore. You probably would transfer that to Albert's account, right? You would probably want to say, I want Albert to have that money, because you're connected to Albert. Okay, so it makes sense. It's rational for us to care about what happens to Albert, right? Because we typically think that Albert is us. But think about this instead. Now let's say Albert actually, his body's toast, we didn't realize it. So same thing happens to Brian and Charlie. Brian and Charlie, their brains are toast, their bodies are fine. They take half of your brain and they put it into Brian, right? They're gonna do that, right? And then as they're going in there, they realize, man, something must have been wrong. The other half of this guy's brain is good too. So they take that half and they put it into Charlie. Now, let's say, again, same memories, same characteristics, same, goals, all those same things, and two different bodies, right, in Brian and Charlie. Now, Brian and Charlie are clearly not identical to each other. They're clearly different people, because they're going to go off and live different lives. However, we have the same reason to care about what happens to Brian as we did cares about what happens to Albert, right? If we had that $1 million, we probably would want to put it in Brian's bank account. And then when we find out Charlie is going to exist too, right, we probably would have said, oh, dang, well, let's split it, right? Let's go 50-50. And what's bizarre is this kind of shows that Brian and Charlie can't be identical to us, right? Because they're not identical to each other. And that's, transitivity of identity. I can't remember exactly it's some fancy word that mathematicians have come up with, right? And so if you're identical to Brian and Brian is not identical to Charlie, then you can't be identical to Charlie, and vice versa. You could say, if I'm identical to Charlie, but Charlie's not identical to Brian, then I'm not identical to Brian. So it seems like you can't be either Brian or Charlie. It would be arbitrary which one you pick. So if that's the case, that's the exact same scenario we had with Albert, right? With Albert, we gave him half of the brain, and we had all those same memories and stuff. But let's say we still had that piece of the brain we could have given to Brian or Charlie. It's the exact same problem, right? So clearly, we have a good reason, Parfit would say, to care about what happens to people who are not us. Because we are not identical to those people, and yet we still care about them. Now, you could respond, yeah, I'm not identical to those people. That's true. So let's say this. Let's say instead, I should care about people that are psychologically continuous with me, right? Although they're not identical to me, they are. We share some kind of continuity. So here's the argument back. Another weird one, another weird example. And you may be listening to this and this is impossible to happen, right? Why are we even talking about this? maybe it is impossible, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't really care. The whole point of the thought experiment is to try to figure out, you know, do we care about people that are not identical to us? And these weird kind of like funky, scenarios are supposed to bring that out or not. Whether they do or not, that is a different concern. But we can talk about that some other time. So let's say you are Federico, right? I'm changing up the names because, man, we need to get some Latino names in there, right? Instead of so you are Federico and you live for 20 years, let's say, and your body's about is extinguishes out. Your brain's fine, but your body is bad for some reason. So we'll call you Federico 1, right? That first 20 years, and then you get your brain transplanted into a new body, and we'll call that Federico 2, right? Federico 2 has all the same memories as Federico 1, right? It remembers everything and then lives for 20 more years, and oh man, bummer, another thing happens. So you're going to have to get another brain transplant, and you're going to be Federico 3. Here's the weird thing, Federico 3 will remember, just because, let's say, of the transfer, something weird happens. Federico 3 will remember everything that happened to Federico 2 after the transplant, but nothing before. So in other words, Federico 3 remembers everything for Federico 2 minus all the things that happened to Federico 1, right? Federico 1 and Federico 3 seem to be psychologically continuous. There's a causal historical chain between the two of them. And so what makes Federico 1 care about Federico 3, right? Like, it seems like that first, let's say let me back up a little bit and say that Federico 1, when you're Federico 1, let's say you have some premonition, right, about what's going to happen eventually, and you say to yourself, okay, I've got that $1 million, I'm going to set it aside for Federico 3 because I know he's going to need it, if something's going to happen to him. Well, it seems like the fact that you are psychologically continuous with Federico 3 is enough to make you care about Federico 3. However, you wouldn't go around and save like $1 million for everybody else, right? So it seems like for the rational egoist, they're going to say, okay, maybe I don't have to worry, I don't get to worry just about myself, but at least people that are psychologically continuous with me. As long as we get that, then we should care about people. It's rational to care about people. If we don't have some kind of psychological continuity, if we don't have the same memories, or something like that, right? Some obviously the 1 and 3 don't have the same memories, but they have some kind of causal historical chain. And if we don't have that right kind of chain, then we shouldn't care. Shockingly enough, I mean, this goes on for just a little bit longer. All right. An objection to that would be that maybe not, right? Maybe you wouldn't actually care about the Federico 3, right? You are putting those $1 million ahead of time, but maybe you shouldn't. So for example, what if you find out that Federico 3 was a jerk, right? You're not going to remember what it's like to be Federico 1 in the first place, and let's say that person, Federico 3, goes and destroys your legacy, right? You really care about Pokemon, right? Let's say, and you have a whole collection of Pokemon. My youngest, or my middle child, loves Pokemon, and oh, it's the worst, man. The older one loves Yu-Gi-Oh, which sucks even more. I don't know. No, if you're listening, boys, I love you both very much. I don't love the cards. So let's say Federico 1 loves Pokemon, Federico 3 loves Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And Federico 3 is going to sell all the Pokemon off and buy a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Federico 1 might say, no, I'm going to get rid of these cards so that he can't sell them off, right? I'm going to put them in a museum or something like that. So it may be the case that you won't care about Federico 3. Also, sometimes when we're younger, we worry about becoming someone you would not like, and you don't care about that person. If you find out, let's say instead, that you were going to get hit over the head and become the next Hitler, you might say, yeah, just kill me off. I don't want to be that guy. So in the same way, Federico 3, let's say, becomes the next Hitler. Federico 1 might say, yeah, at the end of my 20 years, or then of Federico 2's at 20 years, additional 20 years, just kill us off. Don't let Federico 3 happen. So maybe you don't care. One way or the other, though, I mean, it sure seems like these are bizarre scenarios, So it's hard to sit around and say like, well, you would care about, uh, I don't know what I care about, right? It's weird. Some people would. I mean, it seems like we have competing intuitions. Some people would care about Federico 3, some people wouldn't, right? And it just seems wildly unreliable. If we're trying to figure out what is the rational choice here, wildly unreliable to bank on these kinds of intuitions. So the response would be Parfit's argument, we should just throw it out. We should stop worrying about that one because it's just too weird.